welcome to the Big 12. Welcome to Go Big 12 or Go Home. I'm Brandon Shanahan here with Drew Russell. Lots of great football around the country, specifically around the Big 12, as that's what we're focused on here today. Fantastic stuff. Some rivalry games. The Big 12, I think, really did a good job of scheduling quality, but also kind of winnable non-conference games as far as going against other Power 5 opponents goes. And then even kind of looking at the new Big 12 teams coming into the season next year, they also had a good slate as well. And we'll certainly dive into all of that. But Drew Russell, how's it going? How'd your weekend go?
Hey, it was a great weekend of football. A lot of terrific games. For me personally, it was not easy at times. I had some beloved teams go down, not just on the collegiate level, but at the NFL level as well. So, hey, not perfect, but another week is just around the corner. And so I say nothing but wins here on out.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it, like as a Nebraska fan, with as crushing as that loss was to Colorado, I was just so drained before the Broncos even kicked off. I'm like, I'm just along for the ride at this point. Like, there's no lower to go as far as just pure emotion goes. And then that proved to be true. I was just numb throughout that whole Sean Payton experience. They fixed Russell Wilson, but now we don't have a kicker. It is what it is.
Okay, you only lost to Jimmy Garoppolo at home, who did go to the Super Bowl, so let's give credit there. And hey, for my Vikings, we only lost to Baker Mayfield at home, so it is what it
Absolutely. I mean,
is.
if you're gonna lose a game week one, was that in Minneapolis?
I was in Minneapolis. Yep.
It at home, both teams. You at least kind of shake your head to the Mount Rushmore quality quarterbacks that were able to outduel them. Outstanding efforts on both ends. Just truly some all time quarterback play going on there.
That's why we love our teams as we do. In fact, the Broncos and Vikings play each other this year, Brandon. So look out. If those trends keep up, we could get some maybe cheap tickets coming in November.
Absolutely.
Just some next level thinking right
There
there.
you go. You see, that's what we root for. We root for bad football so we can afford to go to these games. I respect it. But
That's it. Yeah, that's it though. Collegiately as well, pretty interesting weekend. And as we look at kind of the Big 12 as a whole, boy, what a weekend in general. Some major wins for the conference, some near close losses on a couple of upset attempts that just fall short, and kind of a couple of puzzlers as well that you throw in there in terms of performance. So kind of a whole mixed bag this weekend. And considering the level of competition went up, I feel like we kind of got a better idea of where maybe some of these teams might head this year.
of course, and I feel like there's a lot of reaction to how the conference performed last week, and that's the kind of narrative that's hard to shake. But I definitely feel like a lot of teams maybe didn't look so great last week, bounce back, and so on and so forth. But one team that looked good last week and seemed to keep that momentum rolling, and probably the biggest game in college football. Texas beats Alabama 34-24. Now, I was at the TCU game while this game was unfolding live, so I had to watch it on replay. So can't quite get the same kind of anticipation and game flow through there. But 10-point win in Tuscaloosa for the Longhorns. And Drew, it didn't even really feel all that close.
It didn't. No, I mean Texas on the field looked better than Alabama. They had better quarterback play. They're both the line play on the offensive and defensive lines, I thought, favored Texas. Receivers looked better. And shoot, even the coaching was able to compete against arguably the GOAT of all time and Nick Saban. They were complete on Saturday. And, there's going to be that ugly term of, is Texas and, however you want to put that, whether there starts with B and ends with AC. But, what's interesting about this team is, Quinn Ewers was terrific. He got hurt last year. They competed well with Alabama at home last year. And if that injury doesn't happen, who knows? But this team, look, they get down late in the third quarter, and then they score 2 touchdowns quickly to start that fourth quarter and really pull themselves away. Alabama, great crowd. I mean, Bryant-Denny Stadium usually, I feel, gets kind of bored, and I think they've seen so much winning throughout the years that it's almost more of just like going to a Broadway play that they just kind of polite, applause as their team wins by 50. It was loud. I mean, there was legitimate juice in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night, and Texas was able to handle it well. And is a great win for Texas, a statement win that kind of shows that, hey, we're ready to get into the SEC next year. But they're trying to make a big show with the Big 12 in their final year in this conference. And I had doubts about them going into the preseason, and give credit where it's due. They were able to go in there and beat a power, probably the best college football program in the last 15 to 20 years.
Great points there. Yeah, I'm a big. I gotta see it. I gotta see everything come together, and that's why I was skittish on Florida State coming into the season. I was skittish on Texas coming in, not because I didn't think that they had great talent, and not because I didn't think that their coaches were. I guess I had my doubts about Norvell and Florida State. I actually, in another show, I did call them East Texas. I'm like, we want them to be back so bad, but they're not actually back. I was wrong on both of those fronts, by the way. But this Texas team, I think this is such a great opportunity for us to see what the ceiling of this Steve Sarkisian, era can look like for the Longhorns, because it seems like on paper he's been building this program for this year, and is not going to get too many other opportunities like this. You got 17 starters back total, 10 on offense. They missed Bijan Robinson, but every other offensive starter back, quarterback, offensive line, wide receiver core is back. Other than that defense continues to kind of get into a rhythm. And I mean, I know they lose Bryce Young, but holding Alabama to 3 touchdowns isn't nothing. And
no, it's not. And it's interesting too that, I mean, they had 5 team sacks, they had 9 tackles for loss. Anthony Hill Jr. too. I was really blown away just on his defensive side. A couple sacks, a couple tackles for loss as well. He was really special. Again, these are a bunch of 4 and 5-star guys that on paper just have underperformed the last however many years. And they haven't. Give Steve Sarkisian a lot of credit. He had a very tough first year at Texas. I didn't know if he was going to make it after 1 year. They were pretty fed up, but they seem to have righted the ship. To get Quinn Ewers kind of comfortable after his 1 year hiatus at Ohio State and get him going and on the same page. I hate saying it, but give him credit.
You're right. And I mean, we talk about so much with Texas that it's never been a talent issue, but it's been, can you kind of get everybody on the same page, get this talent to gel? Then can you put them in positions to do what they do best? And I think certainly significantly better than the previous 2 regimes with Charlie Strong and Tom Herman. Sark has been able to do that tenfold. And I think he's really got these players bought into, it's us versus us. You can put us in front of Alabama. You can put us in front of Rice. You can put us in front of Big 12 legend Kansas Jayhawks, who they never seem to get past comfortably. It doesn't matter. But if we just do what we got to do, and it's a we thing that I see with this team. And I think in the previous regimes, I've seen a lot of I with this team and a lot of great individuals, a lot of stars on that field, kind of pretty similar to what we're currently seeing with Texas A&M. I mean, the talent's there with Texas A&M. The talent has been there with Texas, but it's a whole nother thing to get all that to kind of gel together. And you see this team, especially even early on in the season, just so gelled and so focused and so much continuity that it really just starts to hum. And then the question that everybody's asked, I got a copy of Dallas Morning News today, of course, on the front page of the sports section is Texas back? ? Everybody's going to be talking about that specific question. And yeah, probably. I mean, we got to see it, but it's certainly, this is the kind of win that would indicate that Texas is back to competing on the highest level of college football.
I just want to say that you said it. The Dallas Morning News said it. I did not say it yet. I did not say that they're back. So if for some reason they start tripping up in October, November, I didn't say it yet. I mean, credit. They had a great week last week.
Great week. And when you look at their schedule, it certainly seems like that they got the hardest hurdle out of the way. Now, of course, it does seem very much on brand for Texas to stumble. And the Big 12 is, as we kind of talk about as we take a step back here for the entire conference, not too many bad teams in that conference. Like we talk about, of course, Texas and Oklahoma being the blue blood brands, and Kansas State defending Big 12 champions. TCU made the playoff last year.
Mhm.
But even going up and down this conference here, and the new schools kind of fogged that up a little bit more than last year. But last year, TCU and a top end just showed that this conference is so deep and so thorough
Mhm.
that you really do have to bring it every single week here for Texas to accomplish everything that they're certainly
Yep.
on pace to get started with.
Yeah, no, and they'll finish out their non-conference schedule at home against Wyoming this upcoming week. And hey, that's no cakewalk either. I mean, week one, they take on Rice. They're able to win. And Rice this last week beats another Big 12 team in Houston. That you take a look at Wyoming, who was able to beat Texas Tech in week one. So, hey, they've navigated through two interesting games so far. And this week will be interesting too. And how focused they stay. Can they lay off of all the kind of Kool-Aid and praise that they're getting right now? And that's never easy for a college kid to lay off that, because shoot, some of those guys feel like they're going to be on top of the world. They probably celebrated pretty well, rightfully so, when they got back to Austin. Now can they refocus and keep playing good quality football, and how committed can they stay throughout the season?
And that's certainly my biggest takeaway of what's happened since the clock struck zero. Like I remember after that, I think it was a Sugar Bowl win against Georgia, Sam Ellinger going out of his way to declare Texas back. I mean, that still makes the rounds whenever they get upset. But Quinn Ewers talking with Holly Rowe after the game, very composed, very.
Mm-hmm.
This was a great win. We did everything that we needed to, and this is a special moment. And we're happy to show what we are and what we can do. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's still early September, which I think is certainly indicative that the culture is a lot different than it's been in past regimes.
For sure. And I think it'll be interesting going forward. Again, that leadership up at the top has to be top notch. It seems, at least in public, and I'm sure privately as well, that it seems to be all the ducks are in the row in house and everybody's staying focused. But college football's wild, Brandon, and Texas getting all the love this week. But for all we know, in a couple weeks, we're like, man, why were we hyping that up? That's the beauty of this sport.
Incredible. And I think if there is I think it's also so important for Texas and Oklahoma, but Texas already looking like they have the better opportunity to do so. It's just to build some momentum going into the SEC, because I think kind of coming into this year and when the whole Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC got announced, it was like, okay, that's cute. You guys have played in the Big 12. Oklahoma's won the Big 12 a handful of times. They've kind of run the conference as of late, but Texas, if you can't win the Big 12 in 10 years, one conference title appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Can you compete in the SEC? Can you go to Alabama and come up with a win? So I think this is a huge step for that and building momentum, because I got to imagine if they had gotten blown out in that game, it would be really hard for Sark to kind of sit with these recruits and transfers and be like, hey, we're
Mm-hmm.
close to competing in the best conference in college football. And then kind of seeing, well, I saw you compete against those guys last year. You kind of stunk it, and now you lost your conference championship to Kansas State or Texas Tech or however that shapes up. You can't even win a conference with Baylor running
Mm-hmm.
things at Baylor, Oklahoma State in the title
Mm-hmm.
game. That's hard to kind of rebuild on the spot. And we saw Texas A&M do that when they went to the SEC. Granted, they kind of fell ass backwards into Johnny Football, and once you have Johnny Football, everything gets a lot easier. But that's the kind of momentum that I think is going to be so important for them going forward.
Yeah, and I think final point before we go on to other games is you're dead right. I mean, when Texas and Oklahoma made the announcement on leaving the GOAT conference a couple of years ago, I mean, everybody thought they couldn't compete. And Texas was horrible in
Mhm.
2021. I remember they came up to Ames and Iowa State beat them by 25. November night, just killed them. And Texas, like, their video is viral after the game, like their offensive line coach just screaming at their guys saying, do you want to even be here? And these guys, and like their guys were videotaping him and making fun of him, and people are like, Why would you make fun of that? This seems to be the only guy that cares. And give them credit. It seems, at least right now, less than 2 years later, they seem like they're ready to go to the SEC and compete. And even Wilder, they might actually be able to do some decent stuff there, because SEC is having a very difficult start to this year in terms of Power 5 games. They're 3-6 against the Power 5 this year, which is a pretty remarkable statistic, considering usually, I mean, it's top heavy, but usually even their mid-tier teams usually will win some games. So it's been kind of interesting to see how that's panned out so far.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to be known as anti-SEC propaganda pusher, and this is falling right into the narrative that I talk about, because I think they get away with having a fourth non-conference game. Now, granted, some teams like Georgia playing Georgia Tech and South Carolina playing Clemson kind of use that extra game for, rivalry games and stuff like that. And even Alabama, as of late, scheduling a home and home with Texas is definitely not nothing. But a lot of teams, you get an easy win there, and then all of a sudden you get into conference play 4-0. You get a tune-up game in November, and it's a lot easier to build these great resumes that, outside of Georgia and Alabama, who obviously are elite football programs on a national level, but like the Ole Miss and Mississippi State tier and the Tennessee tier, you kind of get away with some mediocre play that gets elevated, because if you win 2 conference games, you're still going to a bowl game.
Yeah.
In that conference, if you can wrap up the non-conference schedule. And I think this year, and now with the playoff and a little bit more flexibility in that sense, teams are getting more aggressive. And I think it's kind of showing that these conferences aren't that far apart. And I mean, we're not talking, obviously Texas and Alabama, the best in the SEC, seemingly the best in the Big 12. Those two heavyweights going at it, but also Mississippi State struggled against I think it was Washington State. Some Pac-12.
Oh, they played Arizona.
Arizona, that's right. And Arizona's not a very good Pac-12 team either.
Yeah. Future conference member, though, so we're going to show some love. And they competed.
Absolutely.
Competed.
The future's bright for Arizona this year. They got some work to do. Ole Miss and Tulane. Tulane's a good team, but they're not even a Power 5 team, and they were going back and forth for a while in New Orleans. And you're just not seeing the SEC dominance that they would push. And I will always, the big piece of propaganda I'm pushing this year is that SEC defenses aren't even that good. They just have stinky quarterbacks. And so they get elevated by, like I said, 4 non-conference games, 3 to 4 bad quarterbacks. And then, you get quarterback duels like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, where not a single quarterback can throw for 225 yards. Ridiculous how any of those guys got drafted in the first 2 rounds, but it is what it is. But when you play quarterbacks like that in your conference, as opposed to Caleb Williams and Bo Nix and Shadur Sanders and Cam Rising and DTR last year, it's a tough world. So that's what I'm pushing. But the Big 12 doing a good job showing their own here as we kind of get into the non-conference, kind of the bigger games in that slate.
Yeah. Well, looking at the rest of the Big 12 kind of slate across week 2, what are, as we continue on, what are things that have stood out to you, or other games that let's get into? Because there were some interesting results throughout the week. I think the 2 that actually stood out to me that were actually near misses in terms of ranked opponents, with Utah coming to town against Baylor. Baylor outplays them for the majority of the game, but can't find a way to finish it at the end. And Texas Tech held their own against Oregon, a really, really entertaining football game, but also fell short, and kind of 2 missed opportunities for the conference, obviously, for them to kind of build a resume and just make it stronger as a whole. But those were 2 games that stood out to me. We'll dig into those more, but what are others that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, so those are the 2 that really caught my eye with Utah and Baylor, because Utah looked so good in week 1, and then Baylor looked so bad in week 2. I was kind of expecting Utah to kind of run away with it pretty quickly. I mean, even without Cam Rising, but I don't think the Big 12 is kind of known for having that elite home field advantage that like the SEC is, and like Florida State and Clemson, kind of how their stadiums bring. Oklahoma and Texas are a different breed, but like you just look at like stadium capacities, and they're just not up there. Like they're really kind of, you had Oklahoma State, Iowa State, all in that mid 60s, right along with Iowa, and their seventh best stadium in the Big Ten, kind of right around that tier. But I think that they showed that. I mean, and you hit on it last week quite a bit. Big 12 fans are crazy, and they love their college football. And even though McLean Stadium in Waco only holds like 55,000 people, they'll get after you. And then
Yeah.
Lubbock at nights, forget about it. They're not letting you out with a win easy. And I think when we talked about those games last week, we talked about both of those teams are going to be really desperate in a way that they probably might not have been had they picked up those wins against Wyoming and Texas State the week before. So I think that added a little bit of fire, and we got to see a little bit more grit out of them, which I'm, even in losing efforts, I'm impressed by. Another game that kind of caught my eye, as far as on the less impressive side, what was certainly Oklahoma State and Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
I gave Oklahoma State the edge there, just giving Mike Gundy the benefit of the doubt. But man, if they can't get any more out of their quarterbacks, they're in real trouble. They might be towards the bottom of the conference as a whole.
I'd agree with that, and they'll be interesting. We definitely have touched on it in previous episodes too, that Oklahoma State usually has good signal callers. They usually have very capable quarterbacks that are handling the offense. They usually have explosive playmakers. They got the playmakers. I think it is going to be that consistency that's so key for them. You'd mentioned just quarterback play as a whole, just in college football. It's, there are some obvious like cases against this trend, but it's been semi-average, I feel, just as a whole product through 2 weeks. Scoring is still high, but just based on the games I've watched, it seems there's more average to below average QB play at that Power 5 level than maybe in previous years. And there's still a lot of season to go, offenses to learn, but it doesn't seem as pretty. And I'll, an example, Utah Baylor was fascinating to me because Baylor had a 10-point lead at home. They were playing great football, doing a lot of positive stuff, and they couldn't find a way. Utah, I mean, their defense is nasty. They got great players. They also had a backup QB, and they didn't play particularly well on Saturday. And, Baylor couldn't find a way to get done. And I will say, and I don't know if you saw that into the game, that little, give them credit. They were able to go down the length of field in like 15 seconds, give themselves a shot at a little heave to the end zone. And frankly, that was pass interference. I couldn't believe they didn't throw a flag. Baylor fans had every right to be furious. That was a clear as day. They kept the flag in the pocket. Referee didn't want to make that call, but Baylor had chances, I felt, before the game. Turnovers didn't help. And I think a missed opportunity for them to write kind of a tough start to their season and kind of get it back on track. Instead, they're 0-2 in their book.
Yeah, if I was a Baylor fan, I'd be furious. And I'm typically like pro let the guys play, and especially on those Hail Mary kind of situations, there's a whole lot of contact there. But that one was just, he was all over him.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get that you don't want your flag to be the decider in some of these games down the stretch, but man, that's a miss. And if I was a Baylor fan, I'd be furious.
Yeah, no, and rightfully so. I mean, to get that opportunity at the end of the game, and the way that Utah scored the touchdown before, where Baylor pretty much just let them into the end zone, 17 seconds left, you're thinking it's over. They find a way to get it down to the Utah 22, and Ketron Jackson, I mean, he just got whacked. He got whacked in the corner of the end zone. They should have got that ball right on the goal line, give him a shot. So it's a tough ending for Baylor, and they played a lot better than I thought they were. I really thought Utah was going to be stronger, and give them credit to win on the road, pretty good environment in Waco. You kind of tip the cap where it's due, but tough for Baylor to start 0-2. And then, you go down over to West Texas. I mean, Texas Tech, I thought played a lot better on Saturday compared to their week one game against Wyoming. At least they looked like they wanted to be there. Crowd was great. Look, they're down 1 point late in the game, and pick six interception pretty much seals the deal. And, those minor plays, have been kind of a difference for this team so far this year. And, start the season, preseason ranked top 25, and now they're 0-2 for the first time, since 1990. So, I mean, a very tough start for Texas Tech. Both you and I are pretty high on the Joey McGuire train coming into the season. And now they've got to find a way to turn that ship around before it goes seaside.
And I think that's it. It did such a great job, and I'm giving them a lot more credit in losing efforts because I think so highly of Utah and Oregon. I think they're very comfortably in like that second tier of college football, where they, if the cards go their way, they could absolutely be a college football playoff team. I think that of the both of them, obviously Utah would probably need Cam Rising to come back here pretty quickly before Pac-12 play gets underway. And even looking at kind of where they were at mentally coming into this game, big win against Florida, trying to avenge the loss from last year. You don't have your super senior quarterback in Cam Rising leading the way, and then you kind of cruise through that game, and you look at Baylor, who just got run off the field by Texas State, and you think, well, if we could take care of Florida, So I got to imagine a lot of that was them not coming in as dialed in as Baylor. It's like, well, 0-2 looks really bad for us. And of course, Utah's a good team, and losing to them is not the end of the world. But 0-2 is not a good place to be for sure.
Right. And if they don't lose kind of that buy-in win week one, I don't think we really think too much of it in terms of, hey, you know what? They're 1-1. They're fine. They competed well against a team that's won the Pac-12 title for the last 2 years and has a good shot at winning it for a third straight year. No shame in losing. You're dead right, Brandon, and to both of those teams. But since both had very disappointing week one results, and since both games were at home in front of pretty energetic fan bases, and they couldn't find a way to come up with the upset, unfortunately for both those teams, whether you like it or not, that panic button is going to be hit early on the season, and kind of their backs are against the wall as they go into week three.
No, and another game that really caught my eye as far as ability to bounce back, and this one's a little bit closer to me because I was at the game, but TCU over Nicholls State.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like they really kind of fine-tuned some of the things that went wrong in their first week against Colorado. And particularly on the defensive side of the ball, the offense looked a little bit sloppy and a little bit not as dialed in as they did the week before, where they were seemingly kind of going up and down the field against the Buffaloes. But the defense against TCU really kind of bat down the hatches. And in a game where you're looking at the schedule and okay, well, this is going to be the opportunity to really get right and to get the ship back aboard. And I think that they did just that. I thought Chandler Morris looked really efficient. I think that there's obviously a lot of like big game talent there. Really used his legs a lot more this week than last week, but also very efficient, very secure with the football. And of course, it's Nicholls State, so you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt a little bit. But I think that they looked really good as well, as far as like bouncing back from a rough week one performance to at least get some momentum going into week three here. And as TCU plays Houston this week, now they get into conference play, and so things don't get quite easier for them than Nicholls State here.
Break down Chandler Morris. What did you see from him from the QB position?
So first of all, I'm very high on Chandler Morris as a talent, and I always bring up the fact that Sonny Dykes comes into this job. It's the biggest opportunity that he's gotten in his long football career. Power 5 football. TCU's been down and out. He needs to make hay while the sun's out and make it quick, because TCU fans were not thrilled that he was calling the shots after what Gary Patterson did for that whole football program over his tenure there. And so there was a lot of pressure, and he saw him and Max Duggan in practice every single day. And this is why I always think it's a lazy take to just say, oh, well, you got to bench that quarterback. He saw these guys every single day and thought Chandler Morris is going to be my best opportunity to win. There's going to be my best opportunity to build momentum here as a football program. Then, of course, Chandler Morris goes down and Max has an all-time caliber football season, finishes runner-up in the Heisman, leads them to a national championship game. That is what it is. But there was a moment after all the dust has settled on the offseason where he thought Chandler Morris is talented enough to get us where we need to go. And then I think that in some of his previous playing time experiences and early on in Colorado, you don't really see a whole lot of poise and confidence with him that I think you definitely saw plenty of with Max Duggan. So it's a little bit jarring to see those two in the same uniform. But like I said, Saturday night, he stood in the pocket, read the field well, was very, very efficient with the football, no turnovers. And another thing that caught me off guard was his ability to use his legs. He was not only the leading passer, of course, but also the leading rusher of the whole team. And they have talented backs as well. And I think that that's a huge dimension that he can add. Not going to be the most athletic quarterback in the Big 12, but if that can buy you an extra first down, keep the chains moving, that's going to be huge. And I saw a post-game quote from him saying that he felt stuck in the pocket against Colorado, and he worked all week as far as just taking a breath, relaxing, playing football, because he was great here in high school in Dallas. He went to Highland Park here, storied football program, and he lit it up there. Of course, football runs in his blood. Arkansas coaching legend Chad Boris brought him up here. But overall, you just hope to see him grow and develop here in a way that's sustainable. He's going to make big plays. He's got a big arm. He's got a quick twitch, kind of like a Johnny Manziel, where he's not straight line speed, but he can bounce around it and be hard to bring down. And I thought that he showed all of that against Nicholls State, where it really would have been easy to kind of put the pressure on himself. It's Nicholls State. You want to make big plays. You want to kind of take advantage of the talent gap there. But I think he did a really good job as far as settling into it, reading the field. If nothing's there, let's take off. Let's buy some more yards. Let's, save this play for another day.
You almost saw a death live on this stream right here, Brandon, when you said Arkansas coaching legend.
Absolutely.
Chad Morris. I literally choked. I had to turn away for just a minute. I don't ever want to hear those words. I'll tell you what, I might do just a straight walk. I might take the headset off and say, I'm not doing the show tonight. You might just see an empty screen on this side. You can just talk to yourself. But
I feel a little bit harsh. But we're talking about his son. I feel
and I have respect for his son. He's played really well through 2 weeks, and he'll have an interesting kind of game in week 3 when they're at Houston. But yeah, they'll be, I think, see how they can rebuild after that week 1 loss to Colorado, which, hey, Colorado's the biggest story in college football right now. And we won't talk a lot about that game, as you could go listen to another iconic podcast through this network. I'm sure that is fully broken down. Isn't it, Brandon?
It'll be a depressing listen for sure. We launched our hangover episode on Sunday, and it was just like it's awful. They might not win the game this year, but yeah, Colorado's electric. Got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Brandon, I've had to avoid the topic for the majority of this show. As much as I don't want to acknowledge that there was a college football game here in the state of Iowa this last weekend, there was. Drake football played. Started Northern Iowa, we had some great NAIA football around the state. But for the majority of the people, they might have been watching the game called the Cyhawk game. And disappointing loss for Iowa State, 20-13 against that team out east in Iowa. Lot to take away from it for me personally. Defense was great. That's what hurts. And not that Iowa's offense is necessarily scaring anybody right now. And hey, I'm pulling for Brian Ferentz to find a way to get to that. What's he got to hit? About 325 points. They got to make a bowl game. They got to get 7 wins, 25 a game. Defensive touchdowns count. So we're happy for him. Do you know Sicko's committee? Brandon,
Absolutely.
you do know the Sickos?
Love the Sickos.
They, I'm a big fan personally of this show with The Price is Right, one of my favorite shows of all time. And so they have this thing called Cliffhanger, where this Cliff guy kind of they guess prices, and this guy goes up, and if he has too much, he goes over the cliff. They built a Brian Ferentz cliffhanger this year, and so it makes the music as he puts up his 20 points a game. And he's not there yet. Brian Ferentz might have some job issues, but for Iowa State, offensively, they didn't get it done. Special teams, field goal block, and pretty ugly. I mean, for Matt Campbell, a little surprised as well after the game to hear him, make a comment that he felt that was the best game they've played in that series against Iowa under his tenure, which to each their own. I just fully disagreed with that. I've seen him play a little better in other games. It was a tough loss, and for Iowa State, after an encouraging week 1 win, I think it was a winnable game on Saturday, and they just could not find a way to get it done. And kudos to Iowa's defense. It really is a top-notch unit. I will never rip them. They are quality.
I'll rip them a little bit. I mean, they played Utah State and Iowa State.
All right.
It is what it is. They're good. Don't get me wrong. Are they so good that that's a top 25 team in the country?
Oh no, I know that offense drags them down. But I'll give credit to their defense. And shoot, I don't even think their special teams is anything great. But anytime they play Iowa State, they look incredible. So
funny how that works. Huh?
It's absolutely incredible. But I guess special teams has never been an issue. So yeah, you got that for me. Look at that beautiful cliff.
Here we go.
Look at that. Yeah.
I mean, he's not going very fast.
I'm telling. Isn't that iconic? I just howled when I saw that. So I just to Brian, I'm pulling for you, buddy. Go get your cash, dude.
I mean, really, the goal has got to be he finds a way to get to 326.
Oh, that's perfect,
just enough
right?
to keep this job. Obviously, not good by any stretch of the imagination, but.
I want Iowa to make a bowl. I want them to go 7-6. 327. Hey, no, I got to see this keep going. This is it's such good entertainment. Iowa's winning, and their fans don't care because they're so ticked off at this Brian Ferentz experiment. They can't take it anymore. And since his dad happens to be the head coach, and he's not going to do diddly. He's not going to do anything. So, why? So, I just find that really interesting. But at the same time, I mean, look, they found a way to win. And for Iowa State, I mean, I was a little surprised too. I mean, and granted, it's Twitter, granted, it's message boards. These are people hiding behind screens, but a lot of hate towards Matt Campbell. I was a little surprised. I saw a couple fire him, and I'm not even remotely going to go there, but it does show how absurd this sport is, that this guy was on top of the earth 2.5 years ago, and arguably the hottest name or coaching commodity, not just even in college. I mean, NFL, he was drawing a decent amount of interest. And a couple of years later, and now he is just, trying to find a way. And they've got a little sneaky tough game next week against Ohio, but, they need to find some weapons for Rocco Bright. He had a bad pick 6, but I thought he hung in there considering the youth of him. Defense will keep him in games, but even the kicking's better this year on special teams. But Iowa State's got, they're going to have to find a way. I think there's still a team that could potentially make a bowl game, but they're going to have to get creative, and they're going to have to win next week if they want to see that path.
So let me ask you this, because it is a very interesting turn of events, with that Brock Purdy, Breece Hall team just a couple of years ago. It seemed like he was the guy who was going to get poached. I even heard a couple of Nebraska fans throw his name out there at the beginning of their coaching search last year. And now all of a sudden I heard, I saw the same message boards that you did. I heard someone call him Soup Man. So Iowa fans frustrated. And so what does it have to look like for them to make a move? Because I got to imagine he is a good coach. I think he's proven that. So and as a Nebraska fan, it's a very cautionary tale. If you're gonna fire a good coach, you got to have a plan to go get a great coach.
Yeah, well, and I think from my Iowa State's perspective, it'd be idiotic. Let's say last year was a disappointing year. They finished bottom of the Big 12. And, I wasn't even fazed by it. He has done Campbell's done so much good work at Iowa State that I view that as a place that you can have a couple bad seasons, whether it's fair or not, because our history dictates that's just how it is, that we're traditionally not a good school. That said, he has risen that level of expectation. That's a testament to him. And look, if they have another season where they underperform, like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I mean, next year, they'd be crazy. Not this year, no way. But next year, there will be. I think that seat will heat up a little bit just because, back-to-back losing seasons anywhere is not going to be necessarily a fun situation. You could be at Vanderbilt. It's not a fun situation. Kansas, it's not a fun deal. So, for those Iowa State fans, I tell them, right now, go jump in a lake, get a swim in, relax, whatever. But I'm not blind to it either. Like, I wasn't even necessarily mad that they lost or I mean, I was more disappointed in his comments afterward about kind of defending certain things. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, just kind of man up and say, we didn't get it done. There's nothing wrong with that. No one would have been fazed with to say, well, this is the best we played in the Cyhawk game. No, it isn't. You guys have looked a lot better. Like, shoot, 2019 when two guys run into each other on a punt return that cost us a game in Jack Trice. They played well that game. That was the worst part about that one. They played really well. I mean, last year they won. It wasn't pretty, but they did win in Kinnick. Like, that to me is a little more impressive. They've gone to OT with them a couple times. They were way more competitive in those games. They weren't competitive for the majority of the afternoon. And the fact that it was only a one-score game, to me, was a little bit of a miracle. So those are the type of comments that can get you in trouble as a coach. And he might fully believe it, but look, he rightfully was called out on it by a few people in the press, and obviously the message boards had a little more vocal in terms of how they felt.
And I'm right there with you. It at this stage in his tenure at Iowa State, it feels bad to kind of take these moral victories. And you're right. Last year, give him a pass. He lost, Iowa State's all-time leading passer in Brock Purdy, lost a great running back in Breece Hall, lost a lot of great talents. I mean, my gosh. So obviously rebuilding that team isn't easy, especially with not great recruiting ties in Iowa State. 2 years probably, and especially with having to navigate all the off-season commotion as well. I think that probably gives him a pass, but I do think he's got to perform not the worst in the conference, especially with these newer schools like Houston and West Virginia struggling, and I already said Houston. That's how bad Houston is. You got to outplay Houston.
Got to. Yeah, are they the new Kansas?
They might be.
They could be,
But certainly lots to talk about with Houston coming up. But man, so the bar is pretty low. Like, I don't think he needs to get to a bowl game, but like I said, if he does miss a bowl game, doesn't get more than 3 or 4 wins on the season, he's going to be pretty warm next year. And I gotta hope that Iowa State has a plan to kind of figure out what kind of candidate are they looking for. And
and I'm not going to go there yet. I think we find a way to get it, figured out, whether that's hopefully this year or next year. And Jamie Pollard, the AD, I think is going to have a pretty long leash as well. They seem to have a pretty good working relationship. So, for some reason, Iowa State has a losing season this year. God forbid on that. God forbid they were to do it again next year. I don't think he'd leave yet. I think they would let Coach Campbell continue to try to figure it out. If you had like 4 straight or 5 straight, I just can't envision a scenario where there'd be any different. That program, kids aren't going to want to come there anymore if they're not winning. But they're a young team. They're really young. So I'm not going to press the panic button. But I was, little surprised how really the first time really seeing Iowa State fans really, I feel, got turned on Coach Campbell a little bit, which, hey, year 8 for him. And look, Iowa's a big game to Iowa State and, a big game to Iowa too. And to go 1-6 against them, especially when some of those have been winnable, I think is definitely a bitter pill to swallow. Oh, man. What a blast.
What a blast. We'll get after it next week, too. Lots of good stuff going on.
Nothing but winners. Stay tuned, folks. Have a good one.